Welcome in, everybody. It is Tuesday, December 17th. We've made it to game week of the college football playoff first round. Indiana, after 3 long weeks, is headed to South Bend on Friday night to play the Fighting Irish. The winner goes to the Sugar Bowl to play Georgia in the quarterfinal down in New Orleans on New Year's. Matt, it's been a long 3 weeks. A lot has happened here with the transfer portal, obviously with Indiana preparing for the Fighting Irish on Friday night. I do want to start with the transfer portal, and we'll work our way backwards here to leading up to the Notre Dame game, which we'll get to our predictions in our preview of that game at the end of this podcast. But obviously, front and center right now is the transfer portal, trying to balance that with preparing for a college football playoff game. Indiana right now has 5 transfer portal commitments, and obviously the Beebe Jr., the UAB running back transfer commit. That situation is a whole different situation into itself. But for right now, 5 transfer commits, Matt. Out of those 5 guys, are there any that kind of stand out to you? Fill significant positions of needs. Obviously, Indiana addressed the specialists pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I'd say Hosea, if I'm pronouncing that right, Wheeler. He's a big get. He had some really big schools after him, A&M, Wisconsin. I think there's some others. I know he visited those too. I'm not sure if he made any other visits, but he was Conference USA, all conference, and I think it's Conference USA is what Western Kentucky is in. I could be wrong on that, but I mean, I think like 74 tackles, which is for a D lineman is kind of an astounding number. He was second on the team. Kind of a CJ West type. It was probably a pretty good comp. He's a little bit longer, a little bit taller than West. Probably moves a little bit better. I think the staff sees him as a guy who could play the nose and the three techniques, so he gives you some versatility on the inside. But he's a guy, and then Marion Knighton from Northern Illinois. Corner is not really what you consider a huge need, but this guy is pretty good. South Florida guy. Actually knew D'Angelo Pons growing up. They played like little league together. Um, so they definitely improved their cornerback room, and then Wheeler's a big get because I mean they needed to get some interior guys, and I don't think they're done there. I think there'll be some more, at least one or two more on the interior, and then they still need to probably get a couple edge guys. So, but that I'd say those, and then I mean I know specialists aren't quote sexy, commits, but McCarthy's a really good punter from Central Florida, big guy. I mean, like he was a high school basketball player. He's from Australia. Was drafted in the rugby professional league over there, or whatever it is they have. He was drafted like in the first round. I don't really know anything about it, but he's put up good numbers at Central Florida. And obviously with James Evans, out of eligibility after this season, they needed to replace him. And then Frankie gives him a really good kickoff guy. I think it was 78 kickoffs at Texas State, 64 were touchbacks. So I mean, he's basically booming everything through the back of the end zone. So, they've done it. It's early. I know fans are kind of freaking out. It's early. There's going to be more commits. There's going to be more players, and I think at some point one of those guys is going to be a quarterback, and we'll see who that guy is.
Yeah. And then, obviously the Lee Beebe situation. He was Indiana's first transfer commitment last Friday. All signs pointed to him signing with Indiana, and that's sort of the indication that we got was that he signed, the paperwork to join the program. And then, obviously Sunday night, his agents had said they wanted to reopen the recruitment, and it's kind of a cloudy situation right now. On that front, Matt, you've posted this on the board that he's legally bound to IU right now. Is there anything more developing that you've heard on that?
No, I mean, I guess it's cloudy as in they're trying to make it cloudy, but it's really not all that cloudy. He's locked in. If he wants to go back into the portal, he has to show up at IU in January, attend at least one class, and then he can go back to the portal. He could, I mean, I suppose he could leave. He could literally just leave, but he's not eligible to go back in the portal until he attends because he is considered an Indiana University student athlete. And by the way they have this set up now, he signed that paperwork and he is locked in. No other schools can talk to him. This is agent driven. My guess is they're not. I don't know what the deal is with how much he got. If they think he should have more, I don't know. That's what my guess is. This is money is a big factor in this NIL deal money. So, but he's locked in. I suppose Indiana could possibly let him out. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I know in the old way with the letter of intent, you could release a guy from your letter of intent. If you remember, I don't remember years ago when Deland McCullough left. when he went to Notre Dame, there was a running back from Cincinnati that had signed with Indiana. Indiana let him out, and he followed McCullough to Notre Dame. I can't remember the guy's name. I apologize, but that stuff you could do. I don't know how this works now with these scholarship papers because they're not called letters of intent anymore. But my understanding is, and I've heard this from two different people close to the program, he's locked in. He has to show up in Indiana, attend a class before he can re-enter the portal and then go somewhere else if that's what he chooses or wants to do.
Yeah, let's talk about. I mean, assuming he ends up staying, or at least participates in spring ball. Let's talk about him as a player because I thought this was a really nice get for Indiana, especially for your first transfer portal commitment. 885 yards and 7 touchdowns last year at UAB. He was third team All-American conference there. Indiana, this is a running back room that lost Elijah Green to the transfer portal. You're losing Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawton, and Solomon Van Horst to graduation. So you really right now, before Beebe committed, it was just Kalon Black, Kobe Martin, Sean Cuono. So getting Beebe, I watched just a couple clips of him. I like the way he runs. We both said this. He reminds us a lot of Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton in that way. But to have that fourth running back and a guy that's that experienced and productive, I think if he does end up staying, I think he could have a really good impact next year, next fall at least.
Yeah, I do. He would be a nice get. And he put up good numbers for. I mean, let's be honest, it was a bad UAB team, which is not easy to do when you're a running back. Because typically if you're bad, you're got offensive line's bad, your passing game and all that kind of stuff. But he had a nice season. He'd be a good get. He did. He reminded me, and maybe some of it is, he carries the ball in his left arm, and so that kind of reminded me of Justice Ellison a little bit. But just the way he ran size wise, what is he like 5'10"? Around 210 or something like that, around their size too. I thought he had pretty good explosiveness and speed. It also looked like he was a pretty good, judging by the stats, pretty good ball or receiver out of the backfield. So that gives you a little bit. And then these guys have been too for Indiana a lot in Ellison. So I think it's a nice get. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, cooler heads prevail. And he comes in and he's all in for Indiana and ready to contribute because I think if he does, he could be a really nice player for him next fall.
Yeah, and important to note too, Beebe has 2 years of eligibility remaining too. So, this isn't a situation where it's a one and done type deal for him. So, theoretically, he could come in and it could be sort of a Kalon Black situation where he might sit, maybe a third string, fourth string role next year, depending who else Indiana brings in the running back room. And then, leading into the 2026 season when he really gets the reins. But 2 years of eligibility remaining for him, which is, at least good for, sort of the longer term outlook of the running back room. But we will ultimately see what happens with his situation and if he ends up staying at Indiana, past I guess the spring window. The other transfer news, Matt, besides those five guys that committed, was EJ Williams. This was kind of a surprise, I know, to many. Him announcing that he was coming back to Indiana. Now, obviously he left the program mid-season, wasn't practicing with the team, and a lot of that was injury related, but only played in the 4 games. And for him to come back to Indiana, first of all, I was kind of surprised at Kurt Cignetti because that doesn't seem like Kurt Cignetti's MO, right? To want to bring back a guy that kind of quit on the team basically mid-year. But he's very talented, just hasn't been able to stay on the field this year. Well, I guess in the past 2 years.
Yeah. One thing I was a little surprised too, because he had that tweet where he talked about how he wasn't healthy and he wanted to shut it down, but it sounded like he was kind of forced and when he said coaching staff, I mean, let's be honest, this was Cignetti making that final call. But one thing I did hear is he was very well liked inside the building. And I also think that when you're Indiana and you have now obviously the injuries are a factor, but you have a known commodity, a guy that knows your offense, him, you know his personality, that it seemed like he fit the culture of Indiana. He just couldn't stay healthy. And then you balance that with, okay, what can we replace him with? Because they want to take 3 guys out of the portal, 3 receivers. So if he was your third receiver, because you get a better third receiver who fits all those different factors I just listed, would be a better fit than in EJ. And here's the other thing: if EJ Williams is healthy, I think you can make a case. I think you can make a case the last couple of years. He's the most talented receiver on the roster, more talented than Adam McCauley. He's got similar size, but he's a faster guy, probably a little bit more explosive. He just can't stay healthy. But he is, I mean, that last 4 or 5 games last year, he was almost as good, and his stats were almost as good as what McCauley was putting up, obviously on not a great Indiana team. You just but the most important ability is availability, and so far he's not been able to stay on the field. But if they can get him healthy and he's close to 100%, I mean, you put him out there with Surratt and Omar Cooper, and then whoever else you add from the portal, you really got something to work with. I mean, he gives you a big play threat that maybe they didn't have as much even this year with this receiver core that was still really good.
And now that I think about it too, if a bulk of Indiana's receiving room was returning from this year to next year, maybe Indiana takes a pass on EJ Williams coming back. But the fact that you're losing everybody basically except for Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper, probably, and then you have a guy here who's been in the program, who understands the system, the scheme, just the program as a whole. To have him want to come back is probably, an easier yes than if, the running back room the receiving room was already pretty crowded going into next year. So, good to have him back on board. I am interested to see, Matt, have you heard any names on receivers that they might be looking at right now? Because I feel like it's been pretty quiet on that front, aside from Javon Tracy, who just committed to, I believe it was Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean they've had. I think they've had some other guys. I mean they've just kept it pretty. It's been pretty airtight as far as info getting out. But I think they have had a guy or two on campus, and we'll see where that goes. The one thing I will say about wide receiver, and this is not a knock on wide receiver, there's plenty of those guys in the portal. There's always a ton of receivers in the portal. No, I don't think there's any position that's easy to fill, but it is probably compared to like a D end, a D tackle, an offensive line quarterback. Obviously, it's easier to fill than some of those positions. I would say running back and receiver are two of the easier positions. Maybe DB as well, because there's always a bunch of those guys. And it's honestly, portal recruiting has become like high school recruiting. The hardest positions to get are quarterback, edge rushers, left tackles, guys like that. There's always seems to be a number of DBs, corner safeties, running backs, and wide receivers. So if they don't have anybody now, there's still plenty of time. And I also tell people there's another portal period in April. Now I know that's kind of pushing it up against the edge of the window, but still, there's going to be another portal period in April where there's going to be guys who are not happy with their situations or whatever it is. They're going to jump in, and you're going to have more guys to choose from. So there's still a lot of time. I think this portal class is going to be a quality class and help them, replace the guys that they have to replace for next year.
The one guy I did want to touch on a little bit more is Amarian Knighton from Northern Illinois. Pretty productive season there at Northern Illinois, 6 foot, so it looks like he's probably going to be an outside cornerback. Indiana is returning all of its cornerbacks this year, at least in its top four, with at least right now on paper they are, with D'Angelo Pons, Jameer Johnson, Jojo Johnson, and Jamari Sharp. The fact that they went out and got a guy at a position that's not, obviously a huge position of need right now, that might be an indication. I feel like that they have an idea that one of those guys might leave. If I'm reading that into that correctly, just what were your thoughts on that? Because I thought it was, at least this early in the portal cycle, to go and get a cornerback, I thought it was pretty interesting for that.
Yeah, it is, and they had another corner on campus in Josh Moten from Marshall, who's also a good player. I mean, it could be. I've heard that D'Angelo Pons is not expected to go anywhere. As far as Jameer Johnson, I guess he was a starter. My question, I guess my thought process, and I really talked to him about this. Do they see I mean, Knighton's 174 pounds. Now, if his measurables are accurate from Northern Illinois, I mean, you're not probably playing him at safety at that size. He's probably a corner all the way. But are they thinking maybe they can move? The other thing is, maybe they see, and this is just me totally taking a stab in the dark, but with that nickel, that rover position, maybe they want a guy who's more of a cover guy playing that position, and nothing against Terry Jones or the guys who played there, but maybe more of a corner type body is what I'm saying. Maybe that's the spot they see a Jameer Johnson or even one of these, this new guy coming in and playing. We'll see. It's not a bad thing to have competition. The best guys will play, and so we'll see how that shakes out. But I think Pons is pretty safe on one side, and we'll see what happens on the other side at corner next year.
This whole transfer situation kind of brings up this has been a question for years now with the portal, but especially this year because just there's just so much chaos and new stuff popping up left and right that you never thought you'd have to account for. The Lee Beebe situation is obviously at the forefront. The transfer portal as a whole, Matt, and I want to get your thoughts on this because right now, I mean, it's been chaos for years, but right now it's as bad as I've seen it. I mean, that the backup quarterback at Penn State, Bo Pribula, I think it is. I mean, he literally flat out said that he wanted to stay with Penn State through the college football playoff and he couldn't. Um, I mean, this puts teams in such a bad situation, especially with, especially college football playoff teams. How, if you had the keys to the car for the NCAA, how would you handle this? Because right now it's unsustainable.
It is. And I actually asked Coach Signetti kind of, what he would change, and he said if there was a better solution, they probably have it. To me, one thing, I don't know how realistic this is, but I think you need to think about moving postseason, like bowl games and these first round playoff games up. Like you need, in my opinion, college football should be over the first week of January. Um, you have like there's that clause or whatever. Whenever team's done in the playoff, I think those players on that team have like what 4 or 5 days to go to enter the portal. Well, if you make it to the national championship, you're playing on January 20th. I mean, I don't know about others, but I mean, like you were at IU, don't classes start like around the eighth or ninth of? I mean, you couldn't transfer to Indiana even if you wanted to because I would think it would be cut off. When I was there, which is a long, long time ago, I think you had like 2 weeks to kind of drop ad or maybe change courses. I don't know how you could possibly enroll, have them approve you, register for classes on the 20th. I just don't know how you could do it. So to me, and he said that. He said classes start, schools start in January. So, right now you have to open the portal during December while teams are getting ready. Well, my solution is then move everything up. You don't need 3 weeks to prepare for the Independence Bowl or the Boca Raton Bowl or whatever it may be. Start playing games. So like the other thing you could think about now, it'll never happen because it's a money deal. Do you eliminate conference championship games? Because with the playoff, they've kind of become somewhat irrelevant. And there's a big controversy about how much they count, but they're money makers, so I don't see that happening. But start playing playoff games like the Monday or Tuesday after the Army Navy game. So like I would try to move everything up a week and start playing bowl games a week and a half after people end their season, so you can and then wait to open the portal maybe after Christmas or something. I don't know. I just don't know how you can have a portal guys moving like this while teams are trying to prepare. And I feel bad for that. I mean, people probably bashed him. It's not his fault. It's not. He's a product of the system, and I don't blame him. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so he's basically he's in Taven's class. If you want to look at it that way, he's got 2 years to play. He probably knew Alar was coming back before it came out yesterday, and he wants to go play somewhere. I don't blame him. His college career is not forever, and I don't blame these guys. Some of these guys who move on. It's just it's a horrible situation, and it sucks for him because he's walking away from a team that could make it and play for the national title. So it's not sustainable. I'm totally with you. I don't know how this can continue to work year after year. They're going to have to figure out a way to do the portal differently. I don't know how you do it, but you're going to have to figure out some way to change this.
Yeah. It always goes back to the student athlete part of it too, right? Because, the academic calendar is what it is. And you have to get these kids enrolled into classes before the semester starts. And I know some people have suggested, why don't they just move, the spring or just the transfer window to May or whatever, April after the spring semesters. I mean, you're not going to get all coaches on board to do that. Like that spring practice period is so crucial for getting your transfers in and seeing what you have and then being able to readdress it after the spring in the spring window. So I don't think that's a viable path. I mean, yeah, I mean, if there is a solution, I guess it would probably be your. But here's the thing with what you propose is like, you think the Rose Bowl is really going to give up their New Year's Day game? Like, that's been going on for a century.
Well, I think you can still play those games on New Year's Day. I'm talking about some of these other bowl games that are going way into December. Move these games up. If you want to keep those, the one thing I will say though, are there really traditions anymore in college football? I mean, they've basically gotten rid of all traditions. I mean, UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon are in the Big Ten. I mean, Stanford and Cal are playing in the ACC. There's, traditions to me have kind of been squashed for, the almighty dollar, which I get. But but if you still want to do those games on those days, fine, play them, and then somehow that should be, to me, that should be the semifinals for the playoff, and you play it the next week on, so like the 7th or 8th, and get the season over. But before, I mean, January 20th. I mean, this is that's insane. I just think it's too long, and somehow you got to fix this. And the thing about the April thing, man, you talk about that would be an absolute cluster. You know what? The other problem is you would still, in my opinion, you'd still have to hold up the exception. Let's say I mean, I'm just going to use Purdue. I know people don't like Purdue, but let's say you're a kid at Purdue. It's not your fault your coach got fired. It's not your fault the team stunk. And maybe you would like to stay at Purdue and see who the new coach is. Well, if the coach comes in and tells you in January, you know what, you don't fit us, you probably need to look elsewhere. You got it. That's 4 or 5 months that you don't get to go practice and go find a new school. So that's the only thing. I mean, if you held open that exception for schools where the coach gets fired or leaves, for guys to go in the portal, I could see it. But it would be, you'd almost have to make that portal window like a month, like kind of like it is now. You'd almost have to make it like the middle of April to the middle of May, and that would be chaotic. But it couldn't be any worse than it is right now. That's one thing I'll say. It can't be any worse, and you're not playing games. And right now, it's a joke. This is a terrible system. It's totally, totally, totally broken.
Yeah. And I can only imagine. I mean, what these coaches are going through, especially the ones that are having to prepare for bowl games, while also doing all this work in the transfer portal. Because I mean, the amount of work that goes in, like I don't think people understand and fully grasp how much work goes into not only identifying the transfer talent, but also actually reaching out and getting them on campus and stuff like that. And then you also have to prepare for a game. I mean, it's like, yeah, this is just. Uh, Completely unsustainable long term. So they're gonna have to figure something out on that end. I did want to get your thoughts, Matt, on Elijah Green transferring out. It looked like he was going to be in line for a big role next year if he decided to stay, and he showed a lot of flashes and promise this year. Now, granted, he was basically the fourth string running back and only got in at the end of blowouts, but it looked like he had a lot of promise, and I was kind of surprised when he entered the portal. But I guess if he wants to go be a bell cow back somewhere and get guaranteed playing time, then. I guess that's his prerogative, but did that surprise you a little bit, him transferring out?
Yeah, it did a little bit, but then when you look at it, I think he's going to be a 6 year guy. He's got 1 year left. I mean, no matter whether it's fifth or sixth year, he had 1 year left. And my guess is he was probably a little bit, he came in this year. They brought in obviously other transfers besides him. They're going out. They just got to train. Now, he went in before Beebe, so I don't think this has people like that to do with Beebe. I think my guess is, because he was in pretty much right away on Monday, which means he submitted that paperwork a day or two before. I think he was gone no matter what. I think he felt like they're probably going to bring in other running backs. I may be relegated to a third or fourth string role again at best. And he probably wants to go somewhere where, he maybe has a little bit more of a guarantee on snaps. I thought when he played, he looked really good. He was, in my opinion, the most explosive back on the roster. But, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. There was obviously a reason why Justice Ellison, and we saw it on the field, but I mean, Tyson Lawton and then even Kalen Black were ahead of him. I don't know. They obviously the staff felt more comfortable, and maybe he thought that was going to be the case again next year, and that's why he's moving on. So I was a little bit surprised. I'm never shocked anymore about guys leaving. I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, Malik Murphy, just to throw this out there, couldn't get on the field at Texas, goes to Duke. They go 9-3, is a great season, and I do get it. He wants to get paid. I mean, that's why he's jumping in the portal. But it's, again, the system's broken. Like, you could have guys playing at 4 different schools in 4 years, and I just think that's so bad for college sports. This
Yeah.
isn't just football. I just think it's really bad for college sports to have this much uh, movement all over the place. It's not good.
No, it really isn't. All right, let's move ahead here. Some other items from the previous week since the last time we recorded. Indiana's 2025 schedule came out, the full schedule with dates and kickoff times. I'll go through them here really quickly, and then we can get your opinions on it, Matt. Indiana opens the season against Old Dominion on August 30th. They actually get three straight non-conference games to start the season, which hasn't been the case and I can't remember how long, but it's been a long time since Indiana didn't have to play a Big Ten game, before their non-con slate was over. So Old Dominion for the season opener, then Kennesaw State, then Indiana State. You figure should just be three pretty easy wins for Indiana there. Start the season 3-0 with a lot of confidence. And then you get into the Big Ten season, which starts with Illinois at home. So four straight home games for IU to open the 2025 season. Illinois at home on September 20th. Then you go to Iowa on September 27th. Then you get a bye week after Iowa. After the bye week, you go to Eugene, Oregon, which is going to be a very difficult game for Indiana, probably the most difficult game on its schedule. So you get a road game against Oregon, then you come back home against Michigan State, back home again against UCLA. Then you travel to Maryland, travel to Penn State, and then you get Wisconsin back in Bloomington. I thought this was interesting because obviously there's two bye weeks now baked into the schedule. Indiana's second bye week doesn't come until the right before the bucket game against Purdue, and that one is in West Lafayette. So that stretch between the first bye week and the second bye week is gonna be really grueling for Indiana. But honestly, when I looked at it, like just like very preliminary, Matt, like I'm not gonna give predictions and stuff, but I think once again this is a very favorable schedule for Indiana considering the teams it gets at home, and really the only tough games you have to play is Penn State and Oregon away. But everything else, maybe a little bit of Iowa on the road is gonna be tough too. But everything else seems fairly manageable, like it was this year.
Yeah. My question for you is, if you look at this, um, what would be your vote on the toughest 3 game stretch? At Iowa, at Oregon, Michigan State at home, or at Maryland, at Penn State, and Wisconsin at home. Now, remember, between Iowa and Oregon, you do have a bye week, but those are 3 games in a row. I would go the first three because I think Penn State and Oregon are probably, let's just say, fairly similar as far as difficulty. Oregon probably a little bit harder. Michigan State, Wisconsin at home, they were both kind of similar this year. Now we don't know how they're going to be next year. I would say Iowa because I think Iowa is a tougher road game than Maryland. So that I was just curious what your thoughts are because I was looking at the schedules like, what would I pick as the toughest 3 game stretch on the schedule? And those were the three that I came up with.
Yeah, yeah, I think it would be the opening three Big Ten games because Illinois. I mean, Illinois has been a good team this year. I mean, they weren't like overly spectacular. I actually thought they were kind of overrated this year, but they still turned out a pretty good season. They're gonna go play in the Citrus Bowl, so you get Illinois, Iowa on the road, and then Oregon on the road. So probably that 3 game stretch.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, I said Iowa, Oregon, Michigan State, but you're right. I would probably go Illinois, Iowa,
yeah,
Oregon instead of and replace Illinois with Michigan State. I think that's a tougher 3 game stretch than because Illinois is better than Michigan State. Now, who knows? They may not be better next year. But
yeah.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. But yeah, that three is a better three than I originally said.
Yeah, no, you're fine. And Illinois also, they just announced, or I guess he just announced, Luke Altmaier, their quarterback's coming back next year. He was
Yeah,
pretty good. So that Illinois team should be pretty good next year. So yeah, probably that Illinois, Iowa, Oregon 3 game stretch is going to be the toughest. But that said, I do like that for at least for Indiana's chances that they do start those three non-con games, which at this point you should expect blowouts in all three, so you get a lot of confidence going into Big Ten play. My question for you, Matt, is the home slate for Indiana this year is not very enticing with like an obvious marquee opponent. Where would you put a homecoming this year? Because maybe UCLA?
probably. Yeah, either. I mean, isn't it usually in October? I'm trying to remember. Is
Uh,
it?
yeah, like
I
late
could,
October, I think.
I could be wrong. What game was it this year? Was it Nebraska?
Yeah, it was Nebraska.
Okay, so that was I got the schedule. That was the 19th. So
Yeah.
you could do Michigan State or UCLA. That's about the same week. So to me, I mean Michigan State. You do have a. I mean it's a rivalry, I guess. You play for the spittoon. But UCLA is a new, obviously a newcomer. I don't know. I don't know if they've ever played at IU. I have no, maybe years and years and years ago, but I have no idea. But that to me, that would be it would be because it's what's interesting is and Indiana had no, if I'm not mistaken, they had no back-to-back road games on their schedule this year. Of course, they only had 4 road games, but they got two back. Now the Iowa and Oregon is split by their first bye week, but then you have Maryland and Penn. So you'd have to, I mean, you basically would have to do either Michigan State or UCLA. You're not going to have it in September, I wouldn't think, against Illinois. It would be that. So I would guess I'm going to say Michigan State. That'd be my guess, but I could also see it being UCLA.
And that Tina Sunseri, I guess homecoming back to Bloomington
Yeah.
would be very, very interesting because I bet Brian Haynes is going to have a lot of ways to stop Tino Cinceri's offense
Mhm.
at that point in the year. So um, now this is a broader question because I believe only three teams in this. No, what was it? Four teams. Yeah, four teams were bowl eligible for this year from Indiana's 2025 schedule. So if that kind of shakes out and things kind of hold, go translating to next year, you're gonna have a lot of you're gonna once again
No,
you're gonna have a lot of
I
questions.
know where you're going.
Yeah. Yeah, don't think you're going to escape the strength of schedule talk because really up until you get to that Penn State game, you don't really play. I mean, Oregon, Iowa probably are going to be good teams. Illinois, we'll see. But I mean, if Indiana's in a position once again where it's in the college football playoff conversation, you know that strength of schedule talk is gonna creep in again.
Absolutely, and that Penn State game is probably going to be kind of like this year's Ohio State game, kind of the the test, the telltale test game for them because it's not quite exactly the same spot. It's 3 games, the third to the last game, so the second one, but that to me is kind of going to be the one if Indiana gets to that point, and let's say they're will they be 9-0 if they for that game. That's where people and you're right. I know exactly where you're going. It's going to be the same stuff from people. Oh, it's Indiana didn't play anybody. Now, if Indiana goes to Notre Dame on Friday and plays well, and even if they lose, but it's a really competitive game or they win the game, I think that kind of puts some of that to bed. And maybe that's not as big of a deal next year. If they go up to Notre Dame and kind of play like they did Ohio State, then that's probably going to be something that's maybe more of a factor against them, if they're in the same position that they are this year.
Yeah. And once again, folks, Indiana does not make its own Big Ten schedule, so I feel like that needs to be shouted. And this season really proved, especially with the conference realignment this year, this season really proved that you just don't know what you're going to get from teams. Because we thought, Michigan State was going to be better than they were. Northwestern certainly after they won like what 9, 10 games last year. We thought they were going to be a lot better than they were. Certainly didn't expect UCLA to be as bad as it was this year. Maryland, same deal. So like, it's so hard to, and you factor in the transfer portal now. It's so hard to project what these teams are going to look like. At that point in the season next fall. So at this point, it's I mean, trying to predict these games and how Indiana's season to shake out is kind of irrelevant. But as we do every year, we'll probably get to that point in August when we're looking for stuff to write about. But so there's Indiana's 2025 slate. Some other new notes and news to that I did want to touch on. Kurt Cignetti was named Home Depot Coach of the Year, AFCA Coach of the Year, and Walter Camp Coach of the Year. He'll probably end up sweeping the major coaching National Coach of the Year awards, which is not surprising. Mikel Camara was named a third team AP All-American on Monday. He is Indiana's first defensive end in 17 years since Greg Middleton in 2007 to be named an All-American. So really good for him. And I'm kind of shocked, but I'm not shocked that Indiana hasn't had a defensive end All-American in that long. But good for Mikael Kamara after the season he had. And then Brian Haynes, he is a finalist for the Broyles Award. I did just do like a very quick glance at the other finalists. Like I don't know how you don't give Brian Haynes the award. I mean, I'll just say right now, if he doesn't get the award, that's going to be a robbery. But that's neither here nor there. But any of those items, Matt, stand out to you between Signetti, Haynes, and then Kamara?
No, I mean Signetti, that's kind of pretty obvious. He was going to win most, if not all, of those coaching awards, both in the Big Ten and nationally. Kamara, definitely well deserved. He was terrific this year. I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal that Haynes is a finalist, even if he doesn't win the Broyles. That is a really prestigious award. And if you go back and look at a lot of the guys who have won it, I mean, you're talking about some seriously good coaches, and that's a really, really big deal. And the fact that, listen, to me, you got to probably pick some defensive coaches. I think it's harder for a defensive guy to get on that list. It's really hard nowadays in football to have a defense that gets recognized like that, and especially at Indiana. So he was both the assistants. We have not gotten the assistants this year. I mean, we got Haynes and Shanahan, I think at one point during fall camp, if I remember right. And then we obviously haven't gotten them all year till then. They're both impressive. Brian Haynes is really, really impressive. Um, he that guy's going to be a head coach, and I think both of them will. But like you listen to him talk up there, just talking football, and goodness gracious, it was like a doctorate on, and he wasn't even really getting into details, but just the stuff he was saying, he's impressive. The guy is definitely football smart, but I would say that third one is the one that really jumps out, just because I think that's such a difficult award to win. Because you think about all the assistant coaches, 10 guys on 130. I mean, that's really, really, really difficult to win. And I know the coach of the year is too, but that Broyles Award's a big deal. And kudos to Brian Haynes for being on it. And you could make the case that Mike Shanahan should at least been on maybe the initial list and gone a little bit farther. But Brian Haynes definitely deserves to be there, and I hope he wins it because it'd be great for him and also for the program.
Yeah. Yeah. My thought was there's no chance they're going to put two Indiana coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I get it.
Um, Looking through the top five finalists, actually, there's actually four defensive coordinators, and then the one offensive coordinator, Marcus Arroyo at Arizona State. So interesting, they did lean towards the defensive coordinators this year,
Yeah, that is interesting.
and he is actually going up against one of the other Broyles finalists in Al Golden, the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So that'll be a fun little matchup there. I don't know when they announced the award, but once again, I mean. Brian Haynes took an awful, awful defense, put together a bunch of transfers and turned it into arguably the nation's best defense. Um, I find it hard to believe that he's not the obvious answer for the award this year. But if not, then we've watched every game this year. We know how this defense has played, and he has more than earned his paycheck. And the fact that Indiana is about to keep their Broyles Award finalist for another year, and he didn't jet off to go take a head coaching job, that speaks a lot to what they're building to.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and not only, I mean, obviously he could leave after next season, but they all signed him, and all the other assistants signed, the ones that are coming back, other than obviously since Coach Ansari signed multi-year deals. I don't know how many years that is. I mean, obviously it's at least two, but that's a big deal too. And so you've got him hopefully for more years than one, but at some point somebody's going to come and get him because he's a really good coach. So, but you got him for next year, and hopefully for the foreseeable future.
All right, let's that's a good segue now, Matt, into the game, probably the biggest game in Indiana history. I wouldn't say the most important, but definitely the biggest game in Indiana history with Notre Dame on Friday night in the college football playoff first round. Um, this is to me when I look at this matchup, a lot of it is strength on strength with Indiana's defensive line and Notre Dame's defensive line. Indiana's ground rushing attack, Notre Dame's rushing attack. And sounds a lot cliche and like sort of a no duh answer, but I think this game is won up front. Whichever team can establish the run, I think is going to have a very good chance. The weather right now is looking like 20 degrees and snowy too, so you really got to get that run game going if you're either team. The more you've dove into this game, Matt, what is there anything that sort of stands out to you as areas that Indiana can't afford to lose if they're gonna put up a fight here?
Turnovers. Indiana, I think, is plus 50. And I know that's the case every week, but Notre Dame's really good at turning the ball. Both teams are. I think Coach Ignetti said, or maybe it was, I can't remember. One of the coaches said it yesterday, but Indiana's like plus 15, and I think Notre Dame's plus 16. And the other thing, it was Ignetti. The thing he said that was interesting, they obviously have recovered this many. They have forced 25 fumbles. That's a lot. I mean, that's two a game. That is a lot. So Indiana is going to have to be ball security. And you mentioned the weather. So this is the kind of weather where you got some precipitation. It's cold. The ball's probably going to feel like a brick because it's, when those balls get cold. So you're really going to have to ball security is going to be a big, big deal because there's no doubt that they practice and everybody does, but attacking the football and trying to get it out. So to me, turnovers is going to be a big deal because like you said, the weather, I wonder if this may be, for Indiana, a little bit lower scoring game because of the conditions, because you're playing a team that's going to run the ball. And Coach Haynes said it, you cannot completely take away their run game. When they use the quarterback in the run game, unless you want to make your other parts of your defense so vulnerable that it's not worth it, you can't take it away completely. I thought it was interesting. He said, if he runs the ball 20 times, that's 20 times that we get to hit him. And not implying you're trying to hurt him, but you're going to try to make him pay for running the ball. You're going to try to make him feel it, Riley Leonard, that is, for running the football. You're not going to completely shut down this run game. But to me, turnovers. And then the other thing is, I think red zone defense. Can you keep him out of the end zone enough, force him into some field goals? to where obviously getting 3 points, giving up 3 points instead of giving up seven is obviously a big deal. So I would say those are kind of the big things. And then when you do get him in those passing situations, Riley Leonard has struggled this year a little bit throwing the ball. Can you force him into some issues and some mistakes? And then offensively, to me, it comes down to protection. Protect Rourke, give him a chance to throw the ball, be able to run it a little bit. Because if you protect Rourke, I do think he'll make some plays in the passing game, even if there is some weather. I know it's Purdue. Purdue's terrible, but we saw that game. It was snowing like crazy in that Purdue game, and he was still throwing the ball pretty well.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts too with the weather is I don't think Indiana's going to take too much off the table, even if it is snowing, because what we saw against Purdue. And that's the other major component for me if Indiana's going to win this game is you have to be able to establish the passing game in this one because we saw against Michigan and Ohio State, they really couldn't get anything going through the air against those two defenses, and Notre Dame is right on par with those teams in terms of their just the talent they have on defense. You got to get Curtis Rourke going in some way, keep him on his feet. And then defensively too, Riley Leonard, I mean, Indiana has not faced a mobile quarterback like this all season. Aiden Childs a little bit, but I mean, he's not the same caliber of quarterback right now that Riley Leonard is. Um, in Notre Dame does run a lot of, design quarterback runs, options, things like that. I wonder if Indiana's going to go into this game sort of, with one guy that they're going to spy Leonard with, which may be a Jalen Walker or a Terry Jones. That could be one way to sort of solve that issue. But it's scrambling quarterbacks are always going to give you problems. It's so tough to game plan against them. And that's probably the one area where, like, very early on in the game in the first quarter, you're going to be able to tell, is Indiana up for the challenge of keeping him in the pocket, and not running around. So stopping him has to be up there, if not the most important, the second most important priority for Indiana.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see if they do that. If they, like you said, Jalen Walker, Jones, maybe even Aiden Fisher, if you try to spy him a little bit. I think I tend to think Indiana will kind of play their defense. Obviously, you're going to tweak it for whoever your opponent is, but they've been doing that all year. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they play that because I was trying to think about it. I mean, Aiden Childs is probably the closest I can come to, but they didn't. I don't remember Michigan State really running Childs into a lot of design runs. It was more like if he ran the balls because he scrambled when something broke down when he dropped back to pass, and that's a lot different than when you're actually running the quarterback, which was what obviously Notre Dame does with Leonard. So it's going to be interesting. How they handle that and how they try to slow him down. I mean, you're not going to stop him completely, like I said, but can you slow him down enough that you can maybe get them in some situations where they're not as comfortable.
Yeah. And obviously limiting the explosive plays with him too, because if he's picking up, 5 yards on the ground, you can live with that a little bit. But it's those big, 20, 30-yard gains that Indiana has to do a really good job with. I think the matchup that I'm most fascinated with is Notre Dame's run, just rushing attack with their two-headed monster with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price against Indiana's top-ranked run defense. Like I don't know how that's going to play out. It's extremely tough to say. Um, but I think whoever wins that battle, if Love and Price can get going against Indiana's run D, then it's going to be a very tough day for Indiana. But if Indiana comes out and asserts itself right away and says we're not going to let you run the ball, I think that bodes really well for the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I would say for me, my biggest fear in this game for Indiana is Notre Dame dominating the ball. And what I mean by that is they're able to run the ball. Maybe not, they're not just blowing off explosive runs, but they're able to methodically move the ball down the field. And then when in Indiana, maybe Indiana falls behind early on, which is that's something they haven't done this year for the most part. And then you're kind of forced to where you have to throw the ball more, and then they can kind of tee off on you. That like have basically a lack of possessions for Indiana's offense. And so that's my biggest concern. Can you get them off the field and get your offense back on the field? Because if they're able to get, it's almost like playing a triple option team. If they can get 4 or 5 yards a pop, it's going to be really, really hard to keep up because they're going to control the clock and they're eventually going to get some points. And you're going to be in a situation where you have to play almost kind of desperation mode. So I would say that's my biggest concern for Indiana in this game.
Let's get into predictions here. We'll do this a little bit slightly different than what we've done in the past, and we'll look at sort of both sides of the token. What has to go right for both teams if they're going to win this game. Right now, ESPN's Football Power Index gives the Hoosiers 50% chance to win this game. the Fighting Irish a 70.5% chance to win this game, which I thought was a lot higher than I thought it would be because so Indiana 29.5% chance to win this game according to ESPN. The spread is 7 points right now, so they're basically giving Notre Dame a touchdown over the Hoosiers, which playing at home probably isn't too surprising. And then the over is 52.5 points. I think this is going to be a low scoring game, contrary to what some people think. I think this game is going to be kind of slow, methodical, like you said. Um, let's start with Notre Dame, Matt. If Notre Dame wins this game, what are they going to have to do well?
Well, that if Notre Dame wins this game, then they've run the ball well in offense. They've kind of um, you know, I don't want to say dominated, but kind of established themselves physically, imposed their will physically on Indiana on offense, and then defensively, um, they were able to harass Rourke enough to where not maybe not as bad as the Ohio State game, but similar to that where they struggled to protect. He wasn't able to scan the field and find his receivers. And then they've maybe forced a turnover too and won that turnover better. The other thing, real quick, I'll throw in. Their special teams are really good. And Coach today mentioned that. I think they blocked 2 punts and they also run fake punts. So he mentioned it's almost like a weapon for them. So that's another area where you're really going to have to be. Now, you wonder how much you'll try to run fakes, especially if the weather's not as dicey, because it makes it harder to do that, handling the football. But it also makes it harder to snap it. And we saw what happened at Ohio State. Hopefully, James Evans, that was just the outlier and not something they have to be concerned about. But obviously, he struggled at Ohio State and cost them big time in that game. So, but that's why the captain's on offense. Notre Dame kind of poses the real, runs the ball, kind of shortens the game. Not that they can't play. I mean, they can score, but I don't think Notre Dame wants to get into a shootout. I think they want to try to probably keep this game in the 20s and run the ball, and then when they're on defense, get up on Indiana and then get after Quarter Short and try to make things hard on him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just the Notre Dame rushing attack is worrisome, but then you get Indiana's run defense. I just don't know how that's going to play out, but it's going to be really fascinating to watch there. All right, if Indiana wins this game, Matt, why does Indiana win?
Um, Well, I think defensively they they forced a few mistakes from Riley Leonard. They're able to get him into some second, third, and longs where they're forced to throw the ball. And not that Notre Dame can't throw the ball, but let's be honest, the strength of their team. I think they're averaging well over 200 yards rushing. They're like a 196 passing. I looked it up. They're like 100th in the country in passing yards. Which is obviously not great, but that's because they're so good at running it. But you're able to maybe get them into some situations where they're not as comfortable. And he makes, I mean, I have not really watched him full blow since Northern Illinois. They've obviously played very well since then. They won 10 in a row. But he is a guy that can be a little bit shaky with the ball. The other thing is Indiana's offense gets clicking. Listen, USC has not been good this year. And USC, I think they put up 30 something points on Notre Dame. Now, that was in ideal conditions out in LA. But the bottom line is USC has struggled this year. That was their backup quarterback that they went to after Miller Moss kind of fizzled out for them. So I do think if Indiana protects Rourke, there will be plays to be made. Their secondary is good. They got a safety. I think it's Xavier something. Notre Dame does. He's an NFL type guy. But I do think if Indiana wins this game, if they play well, that the offense will be clicking. Rourke will be throwing the ball well, and then they'll sprinkle in some runs with Ellis and Lawton when they're there. And then defensively, they'll slow down that run game and get after Riley Leonard a little bit.
Yeah, and I'll add something too with the pass protection, which this goes back to the Michigan and Ohio State games where Indiana's running backs did not do a good job of protecting Rourke, and obviously that's a huge component of the offense. Being able to pick up blitzes out of the backfield and seeing where those blitzes are coming from. Now you've had 3 weeks to prepare, so hopefully that time frame, watching tape and stuff like that, and just getting on the practice field will help in that regard, but. Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton better come ready to block because when Indiana's passing game hasn't gotten going, it's a lot of that has been due to not picking up blitzes and things like that. So that will be key. And I agree with you. If Indiana can establish its passing game, I like its chances here. If it can't, and you turn it into just a hard nosed ground game on both sides of the ball, it's going to be very tough to pull this one out in Notre Dame at Notre Dame. All right, let's get into predictions here, Matt. Like I said, the spread right now is 7 points for Notre Dame, and um, just with the weather conditions and just how good both of these defenses are, I really think it's gonna, I really think it's gonna be a lower scoring game. Probably in like the low to mid 20s, maybe. And you're probably not gonna see too many, field goal attempts here, at least long field goal attempts based on the weather too. So that could put a damper a little bit in the score. Um, you know, I I keep going back and forth because I could see scenarios where both teams win here. Like I really could. Um, I'm gonna go. I'll go. People aren't gonna like this. I think Notre Dame pulls this one out. Indiana's had a terrific season, and I would not be shocked at all if the Hoosiers win this one. Um, but merely for the for the fact that they have to play on the road. And this is we've seen Indiana kind of struggle in these big time games this year. I'm gonna give Notre Dame the edge. I'll say Notre Dame wins 24 to 17.
Okay. Um, yeah, I'm with you. I've been going back and forth. I'm going to pick Indiana. Maybe that's a little bit more with my heart than my head, but so be it. You know, uh, I think they've got enough to win this game, but I won't be surprised. I'll go Indiana 24-21. I'm with you also. Field goals could be tough, but somewhere in there they get a field goal. And maybe they have to get a stop late or something like that to win the game. But I'll say the Hoosiers 24-21, and they move on to what is it, the Sugar Bowl and the Bulldogs from Georgia.
You ready to spend your New Year's with me, Matt, in New Orleans?
Me, you, and Rabbi.
Yeah, me. Oh my. Yeah, we'll keep it.
As long as I'm not the little spoon.
Yeah, we'll have a whole separate podcast just dedicated to New Year's stories if that happens with
Yeah.
Rabbi. We'll bring Rabbi on for that. Um, So there you have it. Matt has Indiana winning by a field goal. I have Indiana losing by a touchdown. But once again, I mean, I really could see this game going either way. Kickoff is at 8 o'clock on ABC and ESPN. Indiana and the Fighting Irish get a standalone game to open the college football playoff. I mean, regardless of what happens, Matt, in this game, I mean, what a season it's been. The fact that we're deep into December and talking about Indiana still playing meaningful football just says all you have to know about this team and what Coach Kennedy has done. So, any last thoughts? Because this season has been, if this is the last game, this season has been, just tremendous to be able to cover and be there for every step of the way.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, I've followed Indiana football for a really long time, and it's I mean it's the greatest season in school history. And I know they went to a Rose Bowl, but this is different. I mean, it's just huge. I mean, 11 wins, and I don't think it's a 1 year thing. I'm not saying they're going to be 11-1 next year or back in the playoff, but I do think we're on the early stages of a really good run for this program under Kurt Signetti and his coaching staff. And I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Big Ten and nationally for the foreseeable future.
Win or lose, this will not be the last time you folks hear from us. We will, we're going to continue to have podcasts, maybe not weekly, but we'll still have podcasts coming out throughout the
Yeah,
offseason.
we got portal stuff to talk about, and whenever they get that quarterback, we can talk about that.
There's still gonna be a lot, and we Matt and I are planning on doing end of season awards for whenever Indiana season does end. So be on the lookout for that. So we'll have much more to come over on Peegs.com. It's this is gonna be a super fun week for I know just for us covering the team, but I know a lot of fans that are going up to Notre Dame or that are just gearing up to watch this game. Soak it all in. It's gonna be a fun one. No matter what happens Friday, this is truly once in a lifetime for Indiana if you're an Indiana fan. So. It should be very exciting. Matt and I will be there along with Jeff Rabjohns for Peegs.com. We'll have the whole three-man crew up there in South Bend, and then we'll see what plays out and see if we end up getting that New Year's in New Orleans. But for now, Peegs.com's Matt Weaver, Jared Kelly. We'll see you folks over on Peegs.com.